After 10 years of our marriage, my beloved husband was tragically killed in an accident, leaving me and our 5-year-old daughter behind. Still in a daze, I somehow managed to get through his funeral, and that night I returned home. If I don't stay strong, who will protect Emma? I told myself this, trying to muster some strength. Even though I had no appetite, I knew I had to feed Emma something for dinner. Hey, Emma, what would you like for dinner? When I turned around to ask, I saw her standing by the window staring outside. Emma, what are you doing? Then she pointed outside and said something that took my breath away.
Is that Daddy?
I didn't expect a 5-year-old to fully understand this situation. Maybe Emma still believed that her dad would come home someday. Feeling a deep ache in my chest from her innocent words, I looked out through the gap in the curtains. Of course, no one was there. Daddy isn't coming back anymore, sweetie. Why did I have to say such a thing to my daughter? My heart felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand, ready to burst. Emma continued to gaze outside, clearly not understanding. At that moment, a thought crossed my mind. Could Emma be seeing a spirit? But I quickly dismissed the idea, and, unsettled by the eerie thought, I went around the house, double-checking all the locks. Thankfully, everything was locked. If it were just a spirit, that would almost be a relief. As I thought about this, Emma came over and hugged me. I couldn't see her face, but I'm sure she was crying. I'm Natalie Carter. Carter's Flower Shop is a small florist that I run with my husband, James.
Hey, Natalie, can you help this customer?
Got it, I'm on my way. We're fortunate to stay fairly busy every day, and considering the size of our shop, I think we're doing pretty well. Originally, we both had different jobs, but after a certain event, we decided to open a flower shop, which had always been my dream. Now, we happily manage it together. That event was the birth of our daughter. Her name is Emma. We didn't have children right away after getting married, and it wasn't until about 5 years later that we were blessed with Emma. Our previous jobs had long hours, and it was hard to find time for Emma, so after a lot of thought, we decided to start this flower shop. James, with his experience in sales from his previous job, has built a great reputation with our customers. Not only that, but he's also really skilled at using all kinds of sales techniques to boost our revenue. On top of that, his old colleagues and juniors from his previous job frequently come by to buy flowers, and every time, I can't help but feel incredibly fortunate. Our 5-year-old daughter, Emma, also says she loves flowers, likely because she's grown up surrounded by them. James and I have a great relationship, and while it might sound strange to say, people often call us a model couple.
These flowers are beautiful. Thanks for picking them out.
I'm so glad you like them.
Well, I'll be back again.
We'll be waiting for you. Thank you. What could I possibly complain about? I'm at the peak of happiness right now. What kind of person will Emma grow up to be? When it comes to thinking about her future, that's about the only thing on my mind. Our family has a set routine. Every morning, the three of us leave the house together, drop Emma off at daycare, and then James and I head to the flower market. We always arrive at the market later than usual, but we've made peace with it for Emma's sake. However, this morning I wasn't feeling well. When I checked my temperature, I had a high fever of over 101 Fahrenheit. Sorry, James. I think I caught a cold.
Wow, your face is flushed. Don't worry, leave today to me and just get some rest.
I'm sorry.
You don't need to apologize. It's not like you wanted to get sick. All right, Emma, it's just you and me today.
Okay. But is Mom going to be alright?
I'll be fine. I'm going to get better today, I promise. I managed to get through the household chores before they left, but that was all I could handle. My body felt as heavy as lead, and with every step, pain shot through my joints. Maybe my fever was still rising. Before I knew it, it was time for the two of them to leave, and for the first time, I saw them off from home.
All right, we're heading out now. Make sure you get some rest.
Mom, take care.
Their kindness hit me hard. Yeah, thanks. Have a good day, you two.
See you later.
The front door quietly closed. As I watched them leave, I collapsed on the spot. With my vision swimming from the high fever, I somehow made my way to the living room. And there, I collapsed onto the sofa, falling into what felt like unconsciousness. I don't know how much time passed. I was woken by the blaring ringtone of my phone. In my dazed state, I fumbled to find where the sound was coming from. Finally grasping the phone, I answered without even checking who was calling. Hello? On the other end of the line was a man's voice I didn't recognize.
Hello, is this Natalie?
Yes. It was all I could manage to say, with no grasp of the situation in that moment. I hadn't even begun to feel the dread of what was about to be said.
This is the emergency services. Please stay calm. James has been hit by a car.
Hit by a car? The meaning of those words slowly started to sink in.
He's being taken to the nearest hospital right now. Can you come?
James had been hit by a car and was being rushed to the hospital in an ambulance. I understand. As the reality finally dawned on me, I responded immediately, forgetting entirely about how sick I was. By the time I arrived at the hospital, James was already gone. From what I was told, he had dropped Emma off at her daycare and was on his way to the flower market when a truck, whose driver had been distracted, hit him. They said he didn't suffer much, and that was a small mercy. Maybe it was my fever, but I listened to everything in a daze. It felt like it was all just a terrible dream. When I was a child, I used to have nightmares whenever I had a high fever. Later, I found out that many people had similar experiences, and I just accepted that it was something normal. I thought this was just another one of those bad dreams. But this time, it felt strangely vivid and unbearably long. Maybe, deep down, I already knew the truth, but I couldn't bring myself to accept it. I simply sat there, staring blankly as different adults came and went, saying things I couldn't fully process. I didn't cry. The nightmare continued. We had his funeral, and I carried out my duties in a mechanical way. I signed the documents they gave me and probably answered questions without thinking. Many people came to pay their respects. Customers from our flower shop, regulars, and even people from James's old workplace came by, casting sympathetic glances my way. What a long dream this is. Yet, in the middle of this nightmare, there was one thing that made me feel pain. It was the small right hand of Emma, clutching tightly to my left hand. Her grip was so strong, it felt like it might make a creaking sound, and I could clearly feel the pain in my left hand. I began to think that maybe this wasn't a dream after all, or maybe someone was trying to wake me up from this nightmare. Then, as the lid of the coffin was being closed, it happened.
Daddy,
Emma, still holding my hand tightly, suddenly burst into tears, crying out loudly. When I heard her, I finally understood in my heart. It really wasn't a dream. How I wished it had all been just a nightmare. At that moment, something inside me that had barely been holding on snapped quietly without a sound. James. James would never come back again. There was nothing left to hold back my emotions. I hugged Emma, who was sobbing beside me, and together we cried. We cried like we never had before, like we were crying for a lifetime. From now on, no matter what happens, I'm the only one who can protect Emma. It's not like we don't have relatives we could rely on, but I can't live my life depending on them. Whatever it takes, I will protect Emma. I made that firm promise to myself as I returned home at 7 p.m. The sky was already dark, and the cloudy weather felt like a reflection of my heart. As if things weren't lonely enough, the moment I stepped into our quiet house, where James, the heart and soul of our home, was no longer, the air felt even heavier. It hit me again, just how much he was really gone. Then I remembered. If I don't stay strong, who will protect Emma? I told myself this, trying to muster some strength. Even though I had no appetite, I knew I had to feed Emma something for dinner. Hey Emma, what would you like for dinner? When I turned around to ask, I saw her standing by the window, staring outside. Emma, what are you doing? Then she pointed outside and said something that took my breath away.
is that Daddy?
I didn't expect a 5-year-old to fully understand the situation. Maybe Emma still believed that her dad would come home someday. Feeling a deep ache in my chest from her innocent words, I looked out through the gap in the curtains. Of course, no one was there. Daddy isn't coming back anymore, sweetie. Why did I have to say such a thing to my daughter? My heart felt like it was being crushed by an invisible hand, ready to burst. Emma continued to gaze outside, clearly not understanding. At that moment, a thought crossed my mind. Could Emma be seeing a spirit? But I quickly dismissed the idea, and unsettled by the eerie thought, I went around the houses, double-checking all the locks. Thankfully, everything was locked. If it were just a spirit, that would almost be a relief. As I thought about this, Emma came over and hugged me. I couldn't see her face, but I'm sure she was crying. However, even after some time passed, Emma kept saying, "Daddy is here." On a weekday, on our way home from daycare. On weekends, while shopping at the grocery store. No matter where we were, Emma would repeatedly ask, "Is that Daddy?" Of course, it couldn't be. Unless she was somehow seeing a spirit. Sometimes I felt the urge to snap at her for saying it so often, but I couldn't. Emma was carrying the grief of losing her father at such a young age. Each time, I suppressed my feelings and gently said, "No, it's not." But deep down, I wished it could be true. Then one day, when I went to pick up Emma from daycare, one of the daycare teachers approached me and, looking apologetic, whispered to me,
Well, is Emma doing all right?
At first, I didn't understand what she meant, but then I realized.
She doesn't say it often, but every now and then she says, "Daddy is here. I know about James, but..."
Well, she sometimes says that with me too. I always tell her it's not true, but I didn't realize she was saying it here as well.
But here's the thing. It's strange.
What do you mean?
We've been told to be extra careful about strangers and to keep an eye on the outside, just in case. So the notice was given to me.
Then she looked even more apologetic before asking me a question.
Does James have any siblings?
No, he doesn't. Why?
There's someone who looks very much like him. It's not just me who has seen him. Other teachers have noticed, too. We wondered if he might have a twin.
I felt a chill run down my spine. James doesn't have any siblings. I've never heard of anything like that. Why was someone who looked like him showing up? Maybe Emma wasn't imagining things. Maybe she really saw someone who looked like her dad. The thought made me shiver. If you see that person again, please call the police immediately. From that day, we limited our outings as much as possible, and I decided to extend the flower shop's closure for a while. One Sunday, a few days later, my phone rang loudly. Given what had happened recently, I was on edge and my shoulder tensed at the sound. Nervously, I glanced at the screen and saw the name Mark displayed. Mark was one of James's former colleagues, someone he was very close to, and I knew him as well. Seeing his name immediately made me feel more at ease, and I quickly pressed the answer button. Hello.
Hi, this is Mark. Is this Natalie?
His voice, gentle yet firm, offered me a small sense of comfort. Yes, it's been a while. What's going on?
Well, I know it's a bit late, but I just heard about James. I'm really sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
I was wondering if it would be all right to come by and bring some flowers for him today?
For a moment, I hesitated. There was nothing wrong with him coming over now, but I couldn't completely rule out the possibility that Mark might be the suspicious person. However, I quickly shook off that thought. Mark didn't resemble James at all, neither in build nor in demeanor. Even if Mark had been lingering around us, no one would have mistaken him for James. Yes, that's fine. We'll be waiting. A few hours later, Mark arrived at our house and began to speak quietly.
I was on a business trip overseas until just yesterday. I only found out about James passing yesterday.
I see. I don't remember anything clearly about James's funeral. So it was only when I heard Mark's story that I realized he hadn't been at the funeral. This way, please. I led Mark to James's portrait, where he placed the flowers, tears welling up in his eyes. At first, Emma was cautious around Mark, but seeing him like that, she slowly came out from behind me. Mark then began to talk about how much James cherished us, how much he loved us, how proud he was of us. Just hearing those words made me cry, even though Mark was sitting right there. By my side, comforting me, was Emma. As we continued our conversation, the sky outside turned orange with the sunset, and before I knew it, the clock had passed 5 p.m. Suddenly, as if he had remembered something, Mark spoke up.
By the way, has anything strange happened recently?
I thought for a moment. It immediately came to mind. Emma's behavior and the issue with the suspicious person. I carefully told him everything, making sure not to leave out any details. After hearing me out, Mark's face turned pale. Then he began to talk about a certain junior colleague of his.
There's a guy named Paul, one of my juniors. I think he's come to your flower shop before, so you've probably met him.
Hearing the name, I suddenly remembered. He was the friendly man who looked oddly similar to James in build. The answer seemed to form in my mind before I even thought it through. I know him. Could it be? Mark nodded slightly and pulled out his phone.
I got this strange message from him for some reason.
The message read, "I have to fulfill James' wish, so I'm quitting my job," a cryptic statement. Looking closely, the message had been sent late at night on the day of James' funeral. What is this? James's wish?
I don't know either. But if James had a wish, it was probably just to live happily with you and Emma.
At that moment, suddenly the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I flinched and looked at Mark. He seemed tense as well, his expression growing more serious. However, Emma was different. Without any fear, she went to check the intercom and shouted loudly,
"It's me. I'm home."
Daddy,
With those words, we knew for certain that Paul had finally shown up at our houses.
It's him. It's Paul.
Mark quickly checked the intercom screen and nodded at me. I rushed over and stared at the screen myself. There was Paul, dressed and styled in a way that James would have liked. That alone was enough to instill fear. But what I saw next intensified that terror. In his right hand, a knife gleamed like a sharp blade. I was frozen with fear, unable to move.
that's not Daddy, is it?
Emma looked up at Mark with innocent eyes.
No, it's not Daddy. Stay calm. I'll keep an eye on him from here. Natalie, check all the locks.
On the other side of the intercom, Paul's voice grew louder, frustrated that no one was answering.
"It's me. Open up. I'm telling you to open the door. Unlock it."
In the end, he started violently rattling the locked doorknob, all while wearing a wide smile on his face. What was displayed on the small intercom screen was pure madness. Snapping out of it, I ran through the house, checking that every door and window was securely locked. Luckily, everything was locked, just as we had been cautious about. When I returned, Paul's actions had become more aggressive, and I could hear the doorknob rattling from anywhere in the house.
I've already called the police. It's just a matter of time now.
I rushed to Emma, who was huddled far from the intercom, and held her tight. She was sobbing uncontrollably. "Emma, it's okay now. This will all be over soon." Even as I said that, my own voice was shaking. A few minutes later, several police officers arrived, and the entire scene of them subduing Paul played out on the intercom screen. Paul put up quite a struggle, but it wasn't long before he was apprehended. Overwhelmed with relief, I collapsed and couldn't move.
You're safe now. I'll talk to the police, so you two stay here and rest.
It was at that moment I realized just how much of a pillar of strength Mark had been for us. The thought of what could have happened without him made my blood run cold. In any case, the crisis was over. A few days later, I went to the police station to hear the details of Paul's actions.
It was almost like a form of worship.
According to what the police told me, Paul had an abnormal obsession with James. James had always been kind to everyone, and people naturally liked him. But the story didn't end there.
According to his statement, when Paul was still new at his job, Back when James was still working there, James covered for one of Paul's mistakes and handled it smoothly. That seems to have been the trigger.
That incident marked the beginning of Paul's obsessive admiration for James, almost like worship.
After that, James left the company and started the flower shop, right?
That's right.
It seems like Paul started showing up at the flower shop, and not just once or twice. Did you ever notice anything like that?
No, this is the first I'm hearing of it. I had no idea that was happening. Apparently, James had responded by saying, "My happiness is being with my family, so no matter how many times you come, my answer won't change." And he said it with a cheerful smile. When I heard that, I could vividly picture James's expression, and it made me want to cry.
And as for Paul's reaction, he admired that smile even more. It seems like that's all he cared about.
When Paul heard the news of James's death, his first thought, consumed by madness, was to send the two of you to join James in the same place for his happiness.
From then on, Paul started dressing like James and lurking around your home, waiting for the right moment.
The absurd, delusional motivation left me speechless. A moment of silence passed between us. So, what's going to happen to Paul? It's hard to press charges for just stalking.
Most likely, Paul will be sent to a hospital, possibly a psychiatric facility.
Hearing that left me with mixed feelings. It all felt deeply unsettling. While his actions were undeniably terrifying, I couldn't help but wish there had been a different outcome, considering how much he admired James. At home, Mark and Emma were waiting for me. Mark had kindly taken it upon himself to look after Emma that day. In fact, he had been incredibly thoughtful, taking care of many things for us during this difficult time. Mark, thank you so much. This isn't much, but... On my way back from the police station, I stopped by a nearby cake shop and bought some nice sweets. It was a small token of appreciation for that day and everything else.
Oh, you really didn't have to. I'm sorry for making you feel like you had to do something.
Do you not like sweets?
No, I love them. Thank you, I'll enjoy this.
Mom, what about mine?
Don't worry, I got you some too. Here you go.
Thanks. Can I eat it?
Sure. You've been a good girl, haven't you?
Oh yes, she certainly has.
Watching Emma eagerly dig into her dessert, I finally felt a sense of peace settling in. Looking back, from the moment I heard the news of James' death until now, I hadn't had a single moment to rest my mind. Mark was also sitting across from me, enjoying his treat. After a moment, he spoke up.
By the way, what are you going to do with your flower shop? Are you thinking of closing it down?
No, I'm not going to do that. James and I worked so hard to start this shop, and I'm going to keep it going no matter what.
That's good to hear.
He sighed with relief and muttered softly. However, I didn't have any concrete plans yet. The only thing that comes to mind is to just work as hard as I can without any other clear plan. That won't happen right away either. Since I had taken a break for a while, there was a mountain of work piled up for me to catch up on before I could fully return.
Mom, I'm happy. I love that you run the flower shop.
Thank you, Emma. Maybe when you're a bit older, you can help out too.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Not long after that, I was able to successfully reopen Carter's flower shop. It took some time, But aside from the fact that James wasn't there, things were almost back to normal.
Hello.
Hello. Thank you, as always, today.
I'm not here as a customer, but to help out.
Since then, Mark had been dropping by the shop whenever he had a break from work, helping with whatever needed to be done. Honestly, I couldn't thank him enough. Watching him stand at the front of the shop in his own apron, I couldn't help but see a bit of James in him. Whether that was a good thing or not, I wasn't sure.
These flowers are so beautiful. What are they called?
They were lilies of the valley. Their meaning, happiness will return again. They were also James' favorite flowers. I got them this morning. Aren't the small blossoms adorable?
Yes, they are. Let's put them somewhere where they'll be appreciated even more.
With that, he took the pot of lilies of the valley outside and placed it in a spot where the sunlight hit perfectly. I was taken aback when I saw it. That was James's favorite spot to stand.
There, that's better. See, they look even more beautiful now.
Whether Mark knew it or not, he had placed James's favorite flowers in the very spot where James loved to stand. I couldn't hold back my tears.
Well, I'm sorry. Should I not have moved them?
No, that's not it. That's not. The lilies of the valley swayed in the breeze. It was a warm wind, the kind that felt like it could carry away the tears running down my cheeks. As I watched the flowers sway, James's smiling face appeared in my mind once again. If one day I could see James again, I would proudly tell him, "The family you loved is cherished by so many people." And then he would give me that bright smile once more.